Sahana bhavatu sahana bhunaktu saha viryam karma bahai tejasvina vadhitamastu ma vibhisham bahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepaye. So we're to the 14th chapter of the Gita about how the three gunas are differentiated. And Sri Aurobindo titles his 14th chapter in the second series of the study, Above the Gunas, which is a signpost to us that we need not live in subjection to nature. Let's remember how Krishna has instructed Arjuna as to what is the best, the fullest kind of yoga, in answer to that earnest question which Arjuna put to him. He didn't say that it's the knower. He didn't say that it's the lover. He said, who is one with me in mind, who is one with me in feeling and devotion, who is one with me in action. That is the yoga I deem the fullest. It is the experience of that oneness, which in the mind is knowledge, which in the heart is love, which in action is power, the fulfilling power of God in movement. That is yoga. It's the fullest picture of yoga. And that is how he describes bhakti yoga. If you're really devoted to me, then you come into my being. And what am I but this being that transcends all that you experience in this world? And you have to be able to see me behind all things. You have to feel me behind all things. But you have also to understand that I support all these things. It is not just that I'm behind, abstracted from. I'm the universal ground of being in which they float. I am the substance of their being. If you look, you will find a spark of divinity in all of them, and I am that spark of divinity, and I am in you too, Arjuna. So it is a profound teaching of oneness, which brings the transcendent into the universe and into the very individual, which unites all the ways of being, knowledge and love and power. And it says all of this is part of the warp and woof of the way that I express myself. This is how I create all of this. So, come to me. Take on my nature, madbhava, he says. And in so doing, you will become dear to me. See me in all things, in all states, in all conditions, whether they're fair or foul. Be the same, be equal to whatever I deliver to you in the natural field. And don't take your eyes off me. And if you'll do that, and consign all that you do to me, then I bring you to me. Give it up. Consign it to me. Renounce it into my being, he says. So then Arjuna says, got that. But what about this world? What is the nature of it? How does it come to be? What is its secret? What is its mystery? And so, just as the way that he described love was really an echo of how he described knowledge in the second chapter of the Gita, he now goes back and starts recapitulating the fundamental truths of the Sankhya system, describing how nature, prakriti, is the field of activity before us. It's not just the stage on which we move, it's not just the actors on which we move, but it's our thoughts about the action and whether we're an actor or not. It's everything that we experience. All that is the field. So that the knower of the field must be that secret divinity in us who is calm, unmoved by everything, regards everything the same. That same being that he just said is the one who truly knows me and that truly loves me. So that is our implicit purpose in practicing yoga, is to discover this secret divinity within and find our unity with God above and around. And now he's going to go farther in describing how these gunas all function, what they are. And what they are the inner qualities of the universe, who have, in a sense, a soul-born purpose to stand as a mediatrix between the divine transcendent and the divine immanent, so that there can be a connecting bridge between spirit and matter. That is what the formations of Prakriti give us, Sattva, Rajas, and Guna, named Tamas, those three. These are not the only modes of being available to the divine, but these are the modes in this world. And what are Sattva, Rajas, and Guna? Well, the Guna, Tamas, pardon me, I keep doing that. Let's go to the verses. So he says, I will again declare the supreme knowledge, the best of all the knowledges, which having known all the sages, all the munis, have gone to the supreme perfection. Param siddhim. Param means supreme, and siddhim means fulfillment, bringing things to a rounded wholeness. This is not simply the realization of the divine, but this is having a practical mastery of it, bringing it into your actual life, so that if you're an enlightened soul, you get to do something with your nature with that. That is what perfection is, being able to bring it into your embodiment. So, having taken refuge in this knowledge and come into the same law of being with me, they are neither born into the creation nor disturbed by dissolution. This thing which is translated here as the same law of being with me is a critical concept, sadharmya. Dharma as you've read, is the nature expression of a soul force. So what Krishna is saying here is that I, as the Purushottama, have my own nature too. And when you come into oneness with it, sadharmiya, then you are putting on my supreme nature above the play of the gunas into the work here. And therefore introducing impliedly into this world a higher force, a higher principle. So, one who lives in oneness with the divine's way of being, with his nature, is not cast headlong into a shattering enmeshment in the play of nature, which is the fate of most of us when we enter into it. That's part of what we sign in the contract. I'll plunge into nature and forget who I am, and we have to climb out of it. But we're talking about a sage here who has discovered the truth of his being by exalting himself into oneness with the Supreme. And so he doesn't fear being born again. And when he meets dissolution, pralaya, he accepts it. He deals with it. It's just death. It's just the dissolution, the dissolving away of the form that the spirit held. It's not the spirit itself which has been hurt. And actually, none of us are ever harmed by the experience of death. Because even that part of us which enters into the encasement of the body is immortal. It plays with mortality, but it is never besmirched by it. It is never cabined by it truly. It plays with the appearance of it. And what we want to do is to take that piece of us which is attached to the field, the kshetra, and release it into what is superior to the field, the akshara, and raise it from the status of spiritual enlightenment to the state of oneness with the Supreme, who uses the state of enlightenment of the Supreme Brahman as his ground of expression. And to that we turn in the next shloka. He says, my womb is the Mahat Brahma. Now this is interesting. When the Gita ever approaches the idea of the motherhood of the universe, it uses the term Paraprakriti. It is not a Shakti-centered teaching. It is a Vedantic teaching. So the mother does not appear in the Gita. It gets close to it. And it takes this idea of a supreme Brahman, of a great Brahman, which is what Mahat means great. Brahman is the term that we're using for the divine. And remember, in the ancient Vedanta, Brahman meant that which expands, which grows, like the womb, the belly of a pregnant one extends and extends and just gets greater and greater. Here, this impersonal reality of Brahman is described as the womb of the Purushottama. So, the unmanifest is filled with potential. And then, he says, into that, I, the Purushottama, cast the seed. And thence comes the birth of all beings. So he uses the ground of Brahman, which we normally in Vedanic study realize to be, or think to be, the absolute, which is beyond the world, unattainable to the mind, and you merge into it as a drop of water merges into the ocean and you disappear. But this is the reverse. This says that the Purushottama intentionally regards or creates Mahat Brahman as an expression of himself, a ground of being into which he intentionally introduces his conceptive power to produce all these beings. This is a very different view. In all the wombs, O Kaunteya, whatever forms are produced, the Mahat Brahman is their womb, and I am the seed-sowing Father. So, whether the womb is good or bad, or we say these guys are the bad guys and these guys wear the white hats, they are all born from that one, from the Purushottama. And then he gets specific. He goes back to the gunas. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. These gunas, born of Prakriti, bind in the body, the imperishable dweller in the body. Note that language. That Purusha, Kshara Purusha, who thinks he is the mind, who thinks he's all this bundle of emotions, who thinks he's this body, who ages, who passes away, who is reborn, is actually imperishable. But he is bound into this apparent selfhood, this limitation in form, by the play of the gunas. So it's by watching the gunas, or by taking on a nature constructed by the gunas, that he experiences bondage. And in this way, of these, sattva, stainless in essence, is luminous, healthy. It binds by attachment to happiness and attachment to knowledge. So even though it inclines towards the good, towards the harmonious, towards the equal, towards purity, still it has its preferences, and so has a subtle binding power which is to those things that it likes. The second one is Rajas, which has the nature of passion, the source of thirst, the source of attachment. That one binds the embodied one by attachment to action. So the guy that feels, I can't sit still a moment longer, I've got to get up and do something. And I've got to do something that satisfies me. That is the principle of Rajas. And you become bound by your desire for the fruit of the action. But what about tamas? To be born of ignorance is to be born from tamas, which deludes all beings, all embodied beings. It binds by heedlessness, not paying attention, by indolence, being lazy, can't get up and go, and sleep, can't wake up. You know, I'm going to take a little departure here. You've probably heard that story in India about the king who is the subject, partly the subject of the Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra, who wants to know what is death. He's about to see all his 100 sons slain by the Pandavas led by Krishna. And so he wants to know about death. And he asks his able counselor if he can teach him. And he says, I cannot answer that question for you, but I will summon a spiritual sage who can answer it. And he calls into being this Son of God who appears on the scene. And he says, tell me, sage, is there death or is there not death? King, there is death and there is not death. Heedlessness is death. When You are not aware. You die at every moment. Every moment when your consciousness lapses, you cease to be. Than that, O King, there is no death. So this becomes the teaching to us, inculcating that we grasp a firm knowledge of the soul. This doesn't mean study about it. This means becoming the soul. Because knowledge to ancient India isn't fancy learning. It is the penetration of your consciousness into the object so that you become one. So you know the self, you know the soul, when you become one with it. When you become one with it, you become truly aware. So, he summarizes now. Sattva attaches to happiness, rajas to action, but tamas truly shrouds knowledge and binds to heedlessness. So whatever we do, even if we have to eat hot chilies and drink a lot of coffee to get up and moving, it's better to be rajasic than it is to be tamasic. Yes, we want to drive upwards to the experience, to the state of being which is sattvic, where these three come into a sort of a harmonious, settled order in which sattva dominates. But you certainly don't want to allow tamas to lead the party. I think I'm going to divagate again. And this won't be the last time I say this either. But the common practice of spirituality is to make a compromise between sattva and tamas to get this quarrelsome, nettlesome fellow rajas out of the way. It's very difficult to deal with the power of action because it makes desire crop up. I don't want to just know something, but I want to command. I don't want to just command things, but I want to delight in things. Ha ha ha, I'll take this, I'll take that. Well, it's better to deal with that aspect in our nature than it is to silence it and come into a kind of unholy alliance between sattva and tamas, where all you can do is sit still and think about nice things. Because if you become incapable, you cannot change the world, and you cannot fulfill God's purpose in the world. So let me get back to the text, and I'll try to quit interrupting it. Sattva rises up, overcoming rajas and tamas. And then rajas rises up, overcoming sattva and tamas. And then tamas rises up, overcoming sattva and rajas. Whatever, I may not have read it correctly, but one takes prominence, putting the others behind it. And this goes on again and again and again. In other words, you're never going to find so stable an alliance that nothing ever shifts. Things are always moving. All three of these gunas, these qualities of nature, are constantly present. There is not one thing in this world that has been created, that's come into manifestation, that's part of the becoming, that doesn't contain all three intertwined within it. What we want to do is try to tickle out those things which block our spiritual progress and enhance the things that take us Godwards, that take us towards our soul. So, darkness, inertia, heedlessness, delusion, these are born when tamas is dominant. Greed, impulsions, undertaking actions, restlessness, eager desire, these are ascendant when rajas becomes dominant. When through every gate in this body shines the light of knowledge, then one may know that sattva has indeed become prominent. So if you do good work, that's sattvic. If you do rajasic work, the fruit is suffering. If you do tamasic work, the fruit is ignorance. So upwards you go if you practice sattvic deeds. You sort of stay in the middle if you become part of the rajasic life. But if you become tamasic, you just sink. Indolence, ignorance, heedlessness just lead you down and down and down. It's a devolution. It is a negating power. It is retrogressive. It goes back to former ways of being. So you always want to be moving forward, going towards what you can be. So, let's see, when the seer perceives that there is no other doer than the gunas, and knows the Supreme, the Purushottama, apart from the gunas, he attains to my being. So, stuff is moving on around you, feelings and thoughts are arising within you, but if you regard all of that as the play of nature, but see constantly behind that the presence of the Supreme, then that becomes more and more your reality. It isn't simply a presence felt, it becomes a presence palpable, a presence penetrating you, a presence dominating you. And the gunas aren't really you. That's just being out here done somehow. The divine has control of that play of gunas ultimately. But you don't have to worry about that. So the embodied one, that's this soul in the body, having crossed beyond these three gunas, from which the body is produced, is free from birth, death, decay, suffering, and attains immortality. So in a way, this is just a summary of what he said earlier. But then Arjuna interposes another question. What are the marks of one who has crossed beyond these three gunas? What is his conduct? How does he go beyond these three gunas? And this echoes the question that he asked chapters and chapters ago, where he says, what does an enlightened man look like? How does he stand? How does he move? And there, Krishna described what the inner qualities are of the person who is enlightened. Well, you may not see those on the surface. There are enlightened beings that we just walk around bumping into every day and think they're just good old Charlie, but they sit in the presence of the divine and they don't necessarily announce it. You don't hang a shingle out because you've realized the divine. One who knows can see behind the form and recognize that state of enlightenment in another. One who has that can see all the states of consciousness present and know where the soul is in its evolution and development. But anyway, to answer the question, Bhagavan says, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, he who does not hate light, activity, or delusion when present, nor longs after them when absent. He who, sitting as above, udasinata, is not moved by the gunas, who, seeing that it is the gunas who indeed act, is firm and immovable, the same in suffering and in happiness, self-abiding, abiding in the self, having the same regard for a clump of earth, a stone, or gold, the same to the dear or the disliked, firm, the same in censure and praise, the same in honor and dishonor, the same, tulya, to friend and foe, abandoning all undertakings. He is said to have crossed beyond the gunas. And he who with unswerving devotion serves me crosses beyond these gunas and is fitted for becoming one with Brahman. I am Brahman, the abode of the immortal, the imperishable, the everlasting Dharma, and the one-bound happiness. The one who will not get shaken loose from that happiness, who is ever focused upon it. So in this last verse has brought us to the consummation that that final state of happiness is bliss, is the all-originating delight, which is the whole focus of the universe. The only reason this universe ever came into being was because it delighted the divine to manifest it. Why do you think the divine would bother moving out of its supreme nature to settle this great Brahman to act as the womb of all being and then penetrate it with this illimitable power of conception to bring into becoming all of these creatures in which he stands at the center? He's the all. He underlies the all. He's in everything, and he does it for one thing, delight. And so do we. And as a thread of his being, or as a spark of his fire, we are intended to so enjoy the universe that we replicate from the individual posture what he has achieved in his supreme posture. Our asana should be so firm and so settled that he sits in us. So, and we've come to the end of the 14th. So, next time we begin a preparation to go into the 15th, because at this point Sri Aurobindo, I think, will pause and take a breath and draw us into a large picture of what is going to happen next based upon what has brought us to this point. So we will soon be in the 15th chapter, but we have a little work to do to get there. The Supreme, the Purushottama, is the subject of the 15th chapter. So it'll be wonderful. We have only a couple of weeks to wait. By the way, this idea that there is a state of being beyond the gunas where the divine is active in his own supreme nature, and that the yogin is invited to share in that nature, sadharmya, and still be active here. Krishna has not given up the idea that Arjuna, even though he regards friend and foe the same, must act and destroy those who contend on the side of darkness. But he wants him to act from that state of equality and allow his nature, madbhavam, the divine nature, to play in him. So there is this idea, going back to the Gita, that through the portals of ordinary nature can flow the energies and qualities of a greater nature, sattva, rajas, tamas, can give way to jyoti. tapas, and shama, to a greater light, a greater power, a greater peace. Because tamas, while it may be inertia in the lower world, is peace and calm stability in the higher. And rajas, while it may be active and blinded and desire-ridden here, is really the fulsome power of the divine, the mighty arm of God in action. And light, which only partially illuminates our mind here, is the full orb of the sun in the divine nature. So how do we bring that into point in our body? This is the yoga of Sri Aurobindo, which in a way goes beyond the yoga of the Gita. And Sri Aurobindo's every spiritual state, he related back dynamically to the body, bringing higher and higher states of consciousness, power, and bliss into the very cells of his physical structure. Not for a year, not just as an experience, but in all experiences, spreading over decades. So his body was drenched in divinity. And as a result of that, his loyal attendants, when they would comb his hair, would keep that hair because it represented the penetration of the divine consciousness upon earth. Champak Lal carefully kept the hair. When he trimmed Sri Aurobindo's fingernails, kept those aside, etc., etc. Whatever came from Sri Aurobindo's body was packaged and kept beautifully. And later the mother would begin releasing these empowered vessels of Sri Aurobindo's physical consciousness, calling them the relics of Sri Aurobindo. And they were first sent to various centers around India. First time they ever left the shores of India, they came to America. They came here to Pensacola. And tomorrow is the 9th of July, which is the day we received Sri Aurobindo's relics in his room in 1983. I know it's a Monday, and I know that most of you won't be able to come and join me for a meditation at 10 in the morning because you will be required to do other things. But I'm keeping part of your inner consciousness with me so that inwardly you will participate. Next year we'll plan a little farther out because it'll be the 30th year, the 30th anniversary of the reception of Sri Aurobindo's relics. And we'll want to do something a little more festive. But tomorrow at 10, we'll gather and meditate. So direct your awareness here if you can't direct your steps here, and be with us. We are grateful to have the empowering presence of Sri Aurobindo's relics. If you learn how to open the subtle regions of your physical consciousness to its play, then the reliquary will have the greatest impact upon you. It can aid and benefit you in your sadhana. That path that leads straight to the divine. So, namaste. I salute the divine in you, and we'll go for our meditation now. Jai Ma.